What drives a man to sit silent for 39 days in a courtroom where the world waits for him to speak? What truth could possibly hide behind that stillness? Before we begin, remember to subscribe for more in-depth coverage of unfolding investigations like this one. For over a month, Tyler Robinson has remained at the center of one of the most closely watched trials in recent memory, accused of shooting prominent political figure Charlie Kirk during a live event at Utah Valley University. Yet through it all, Robinson has spoken almost nothing. His silence has become the story itself. Day after day, the cameras fix on him, expressionless, composed, and withdrawn. Prosecutors argue that this silence shows defiance. The defense insists it's a response to trauma. Whatever the reason, it has left the public fascinated and unsettled. That silence finally broke on the 40th day. But what Robinson said was far from what anyone expected. He didn't proclaim innocence, or remorse, or outrage. He simply asked the judge for a change of clothes. It was an ordinary request that somehow reignited global attention. People wondered, was this a glimpse of normalcy, or a subtle message beneath the surface? In a case already defined by restraint and speculation, even the smallest gestures now carry weight. The shooting itself happened during what should have been an ordinary public lecture. Charlie Kirk, a well-known and sometimes controversial political commentator, was delivering his speech to a packed auditorium when a loud crack stopped everything. Chaos followed, students ducked, security rushed the stage, and live cameras kept rolling. Within hours, the footage spread online, analyzed from every possible angle. The moment was replayed again and again, but the clarity everyone expected never came. Police identified Robinson within a day, citing what they described as online posts critical of Kirk's political views and a record of gun ownership. Investigators located a Mauser .306 rifle registered under his name, and the story appeared to fall neatly into place. But as the investigation deepened, the details proved less straightforward. Forensic experts examining the weapons said the available evidence could not conclusively tie the rifle to the bullet that struck Kirk. While no one disputed that Robinson owned the firearm, the exact ballistic match remained uncertain. Some of the technical data, the marks left by the firing mechanism and the bullet's trajectory, didn't align perfectly. Law enforcement called these inconclusive findings, a phrase that only added to public confusion. Rather than resolving doubts, each update seemed to open more questions. Adding to the uncertainty was the disappearance of a key witness, a journalism student named Melissa Trent. She had been filming the event on her phone and reportedly shared her footage with investigators soon after. Her account, given in an early statement, mentioned seeing movement near an upper seating area moments before the sound of the gunshot. But soon after, she stopped responding to calls and messages. Friends described her as overwhelmed by the media attention, and authorities have not confirmed any wrongdoing in her absence. Still, her missing presence has left an emotional gap in the narrative, one more unanswered piece in a case already defined by them. Over time, questions about the management of evidence began to surface. Portions of the university's internal security records were redacted in later versions, which officials said was standard procedure for protecting sensitive information. Yet in an atmosphere already charged with speculation, every omission drew more scrutiny. Some journalists questioned whether the pace of information release was feeding public mistrust. Investigators responded that transparency must balance with the need to preserve the integrity of the case, a statement that underscored how delicate the situation had become. In response to the growing uncertainty, the Kirk family hired a private investigator, former intelligence analyst David Renshaw, to conduct an independent review. His recruitment marked a turning point in a story that had already captured the attention of the public as the family's quiet determination shifted toward active investigation. Renshaw was known for his meticulous attention to detail, and his background in intelligence meant that he approached the case not with emotion, but with methodical precision. His task was not to find someone to blame, but to ensure that no lead, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, was ignored. For the Kirk family, this was about peace of mind, the kind that only comes when every possible question has been asked and every possible answer explored. They wanted to understand what went wrong, how it happened, and why so many layers of protection had failed when they were needed most. Renshaw's team began by reviewing security contracts, venue layouts, and access logs, moving through each document as if reconstructing the night minute by minute. They mapped out entry points, emergency exits, and restricted zones, searching for vulnerabilities that might explain how someone could have breached areas thought to be secure. Every angle was tested, every path traced. What they discovered has not been publicly disclosed, but sources close to the investigation hinted that the findings revealed troubling inconsistencies in security procedures. These gaps, though perhaps small on paper, could have been enough to create opportunities for an unnoticed intrusion. For the Kirk family, Renshaw's involvement was more than an investigation. It was an act of devotion. It was their way of reclaiming control in a situation defined by confusion and loss. Their determination reflected a universal truth that anyone who has faced tragedy understands. Clarity becomes both the hardest and most necessary thing to find. While the families sought understanding through private channels, the courtroom took on a different rhythm. The defense, representing Robinson, built its strategy around process rather than personality. Instead of attacking the emotional core of the prosecution's argument, they chose to question the integrity of the evidence itself. Their central argument revolved around the digital footprint linked to Robinson, records, messages, and social media interactions that prosecutors presented as key components of their case. The defense argued that in an era defined by information overload, digital data is far from infallible. Cyber specialists testified that online records can be duplicated, manipulated, or misattributed, especially across interconnected networks. They explained how metadata, the invisible layer of information behind every file or post, could be misinterpreted or even corrupted over time. Their testimony painted a complex picture of modern digital evidence, one in which certainty is rarely absolute. They reminded the court that technology, for all its precision, still depends on human input, and human error is inevitable. For the defense, this was the cornerstone of doubt, that what seemed concrete could, in fact, be fragile. They insisted that digital traces alone should not be enough to shape a man's fate. The prosecution countered firmly, arguing that while no single piece of evidence could stand alone, the overall pattern, the timing, behavior, and context, formed a consistent narrative that pointed clearly toward Robinson. They claimed that coincidences rarely align so neatly and that digital records, when supported by corroborating evidence, are not unreliable but revealing. The courtroom became a battleground of interpretation, with each side offering not just facts but philosophies, one emphasizing skepticism, the other confidence in human investigation. Outside the courtroom, the public followed every turn with relentless attention. The case had become more than a legal proceeding. It was a cultural moment, a reflection of broader anxieties about truth, power, and the reliability of information. Supporters of the Kirk family viewed the incident as a warning about the dangers faced by public figures in an increasingly polarized world. To them, this tragedy underscored how quickly admiration can turn to hostility and how fame can make someone both visible and vulnerable. Others, however, urged restraint, cautioning against the rush to judgment before all evidence had been presented. They pointed out that history is filled with cases where assumptions led to injustice, where the need for answers outweighed the need for accuracy. Legal analysts observed that the case had blurred the line between courtroom evidence and media narrative. Every new revelation, every leaked document or emotional testimony was instantly dissected online. Social media became an extension of the trial, a parallel arena where facts were debated, theories spun, and emotions amplified. In many ways, the legal process had been hijacked by public perception, and perception itself became part of the evidence. Each side of the debate found confirmation in the details they chose to emphasize, reinforcing beliefs rather than challenging them. It was a reminder of how modern justice unfolds not only in courtrooms, but in the court of public opinion, where truth competes with interpretation and objectivity struggles against the gravitational pull of bias. Through it all, one figure remained curiously still: Robinson. His quiet presence throughout the proceedings drew as much speculation as the evidence itself. Some saw his silence as strategic, a calculated effort to project calm, to avoid saying anything that might be used against him. Others saw something more human beneath that restraint: trauma, fear, perhaps even a kind of resignation. Behavioral experts called to testify offered multiple possibilities. In high-stress environments, they explained, silence can take many forms. It can be a defense mechanism, a way to regain control when words feel dangerous. It can also be an expression of deep internal conflict, where emotion overwhelms articulation. For some, silence is guilt's shadow. For others, it is innocence's refuge. Psychologists emphasize that human behavior cannot be easily decoded, especially under extraordinary pressure. A person might withdraw not because they are hiding something, but because the weight of exposure becomes unbearable. In Robinson's case, his composure, or lack of visible reaction, became its own kind of testimony, one open to interpretation but resistant to certainty. The silence grew symbolic, embodying the very tension that defined the entire case, the uneasy space between what can be proven and what must be believed. As weeks turned into months, the court proceedings slowed, not from lack of progress, but from a deliberate choice to ensure precision. Forensic experts were granted more time to re-examine the physical evidence, the weapon, the recordings, the fibers, and the microscopic traces that might hold untold stories. New technologies were brought in to enhance audio samples and reanalyze digital timestamps. Officials stressed that the process had to be exhaustive, even if it meant delaying the outcome. Public impatience grew, but legal scholars reminded observers that thoroughness is the foundation of credibility. In a case already clouded by controversy, even the smallest procedural flaw could unravel the entire verdict. It was a slow, often frustrating process, but one grounded in the belief that truth cannot be rushed. Meanwhile, journalists covering the case reflected on how a single night had transformed into a national conversation about justice and trust. The more facts emerged, the more complex the story became. A well-documented event, witnessed by hundreds and recorded from multiple angles, had paradoxically become one of the most elusive mysteries in recent memory. Every new piece of evidence seemed to open as many questions as it answered. The case began to transcend its immediate details, prompting wider reflection on how societies process information in times of crisis. How do we separate fact from narrative when both spread at the same speed? How do we resist the temptation to fill gaps in knowledge with assumption or fear? The Kirk family's search for truth, Robinson's silence, and the public's restless curiosity converged into something larger, a test of institutional trust. For the family, truth was personal and sacred, a path to closure. For Robinson, it was a matter of survival and reputation. For the public, it became symbolic of something even broader, the fragile balance between justice and perception. The case illuminated the limits of modern systems built on data and communication, systems that promise transparency but often deliver confusion when too many voices compete to define what's real. Every trial reveals more than just the crime at its center. It reveals the society that surrounds it. In this case, what emerged was a portrait of a world struggling to navigate truth in an age of endless information. The unanswered questions were no longer just about who fired a weapon or why, but about how communities interpret evidence when certainty slips through their grasp. It became clear that truth, though sought by everyone, is not always a singular thing. It can fracture into perspectives, each colored by experience, loyalty, and fear. And yet, despite the noise and speculation, some things remained constant. The quiet resilience of the Kirk family, the steady patience of investigators, and the haunting ambiguity of Robinson's silence. Each represented a different response to the same storm of uncertainty. Together, they formed a tableau of human reaction to tragedy, the need to act, the need to believe, and the need to endure. As the trial moved toward its final phase, observers began to wonder whether any verdict could truly satisfy the questions that had grown around it. Perhaps the ultimate meaning of this case lay not in its resolution but in its revelation, in how it exposed the ways people search for meaning when the truth refuses to simplify itself. Silence, once seen as emptiness, came to symbolize everything words could not hold: pain, doubt, endurance, and the heavy cost of public scrutiny. Perhaps, in the end, this case will be remembered less for the verdict than for what it revealed about the nature of silence, how it can conceal guilt, protect innocence, or simply embody pain too complex for language. For the Kirk family, that silence represents the void left by unanswered questions. For Robinson, it may be his only defense, a fragile shield against a world eager for confession. And for everyone watching, it stands as a mirror reflecting our own uncertainty, our hunger for closure, and our discomfort with ambiguity. Until the final judgment arrives, that silence remains the most powerful testimony of all, a reminder that truth, however we pursue it, often hides not in what is said, but in what is left unsaid. And as this story continues to unfold, the world watches, waiting for the moment when the silence might finally break, or perhaps when we finally learn to listen to what it's been saying all along. For more updates as this case develops, don't forget to subscribe for continuing coverage.